Hey guys, tonight we drift through the cloudy peaks of Mount Olympus, where gods sip nectar, throw tantrums, and make questionable decisions that shape the fate of mortals, usually for the worse. Our main character tonight, Zeus, king of the gods, lord of thunder, and quite possibly the ancient world's most consistent overreactor. From family drama to divine punishments that make modern HR departments look merciful, Zeus seems to specialize in taking a bad situation and lighting it on fire, sometimes literally. You probably won't survive this tale if you're the type who yells "just talk it out" at characters in a movie. Zeus doesn't do conversations, he does thunderbolts transformations and once a magical flying goat. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to comment with your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing our sleepy little community from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts as all good divine soap operas do, with a prophecy and a patricide. Zeus isn't born into greatness, he seizes it violently. Cronus, his father, isn't exactly father of the year material. After learning that one of his children will overthrow him, Cronus takes the logical next step, eating all of them. Whole. No seasoning. Just straight up baby swallowing. Only Zeus escapes, hidden away by his mother Rhea in a cave on the island of Crete, suckled by a divine goat named Amalthea, and protected by armed dancers called the Curetes, who banged their shields to mask his cries. You know as one does, when Zeus grows up, he returns not for a warm family reunion, but to make his father vomit. Literally. With the help of a magical emetic potion, Cronus disgorges his siblings fully grown and understandably annoyed. Now reunited, the siblings, Hestia Hera, Demeter Poseidon, and Hades, team up with Zeus to wage the Titanomachy, a decade-long battle against the Titans, their father's ancient siblings. It's mythic. It's messy. It's basically Thanksgiving dinner with more lava. Zeus leads the charge. He frees the 100-handed ones and the Cyclopes from Tartarus, ancient beings his father had imprisoned, and in return, they gift him thunder lightning and a sky-high superiority complex. Poseidon gets a trident, Hades a helmet of invisibility. It's like an ancient loot drop for Team Olympus. They win, of course. The Titans are defeated, and Zeus locks them away in the dark abyss of Tartarus, guarded by those same 100-handed ones. And this is where the first cracks appear in the divine marble. Because while overthrowing a tyrant seems noble, Zeus quickly starts, Cronusing things up. Instead of breaking the cycle of paranoia and control, Zeus doubles down. He claims the sky splits the world with his brother's sea for Poseidon, underworld for Hades, and sets himself up as king of everything else. The whole let's rule as equals idea lasts about as long as a mortal lifespan, and while mortals below try to figure out farming and not dying of infected splinters, Zeus is up in Olympus making questionable personnel decisions. He rewards loyalty, yes, but also vanity, cruelty, and a weird sense of divine theatre. When mortals displease him, he doesn't send a memo. He sends earthquakes. Historians still argue whether Zeus's early reign was motivated by genuine fear of chaos, or just an overdeveloped sense of dramatic timing. What is certain is that he surrounds himself with yes-gods and starts making policies that seem reactionary. Case in point, Prometheus. Prometheus, the crafty titan, loves humans. He gives them fire, literal fire, stolen from Olympus. Zeus had withheld it, believing mortals weren't ready. Prometheus disagrees, so Zeus does what any mature leader would do, punishes the gift giver. But more on that later. At this point, we're still focused on Zeus's rise, and the first warning signs that maybe, just maybe, he's not the benevolent sky dad PR makes him out to be. There's also the problem of succession. Zeus fears, just like Cronus did, that his children may one day rise against him. which is ironic because he just fought a war to prevent that kind of tyranny. So what does he do? Swallows Metis, the goddess of wisdom, while she's pregnant with Athena. It's supposed to prevent the birth of a child that might surpass him. Spoiler, it doesn't. Athena will burst from his forehead in full armor later on, but we'll get to that chaos soon enough. Still, let's give Zeus credit where it's due. He unifies Olympus, standardizes divine roles, and introduces a pantheon that humans can actually pray to without risking a hailstorm every Tuesday. But even these wins come wrapped in personal biases. Gods who challenge him, even subtly, find themselves punished or demoted. He's not above petty retaliation, especially if you're mortal, and especially if you're clever. You'd think immortality would come with some emotional regulation, but no. If anything, it makes the tantrums bigger. One obscure but telling detail: Zeus once attempted to woo a mortal named Aegina by turning into an eagle and abducting her to an island later named after her. It's a footnote in myth, but it shows his operating mode problem. Don't solve it. Relocate it. Preferably while shape-shifting. And yet despite all this, the Olympians follow him. Maybe out of loyalty, maybe out of fear, or maybe because deep down they know that every time Zeus blunders, it sets off a new myth, and immortals like humans do love a good story. Remember the Cyclopes who forged Zeus's lightning bolts? There's a theory that they regretted it, not because of the violence, but because every time he throws one in a tantrum, it's like giving your toddler a flamethrower. You can imagine them in their forge, looking down at the earth, muttering, "Again." Really, it's easy to think of Zeus as a caricature. Beard clouds bolt. But if you strip away the iconography, what you find is a pattern. He reacts from fear, pride, and often, oddly enough, love. Twisted, possessive love, but love nonetheless. He's not just power-hungry, he's afraid of losing control. And fear, especially when you have cosmic weapons and zero accountability, tends to make things worse. In this first chapter of his reign, we see the blueprint for all that follows. A cycle of paranoia, overreaction, and poetic justice that usually backfires. The irony is almost elegant. Zeus defeats Cronus to stop history from repeating, then sets it spinning all over again, just with more thunderclaps and fewer apologies. By the time he's sitting on Olympus, in his ivory throne, the seeds of future disasters are already growing in the cracks of his empire. And rather than pruning them, Zeus waters them with ego lightning and the occasional impromptu swan impersonation. So tonight, as we drift deeper into the folds of ancient sky, remember sometimes the worst choices aren't made out of cruelty, but out of fear pretending to be wisdom. And in the case of Zeus, it's usually both. Pandora stands on the edge of a cliff wind, tugging at her delicate robes, sunlight bouncing off the polished bronze lid of a jar she's not supposed to open. Her fingers tremble, not from fear, but from something more ancient and irresistible: curiosity. And as she lifts that lid just a crack, the entire human condition spills out like spilled perfume made of nightmares. But let's rewind. Zeus didn't just wake up one morning and decide to ruin humanity's afternoon. This moment, Pandora, the jar the unraveling, starts with a grudge. A petty, flaming grudge against Prometheus, the titan who dared to care. Prometheus's crime is simple. He gives humans fire. Not metaphorical fire, not inspiration, but actual practical survival-grade flame. The kind that boils water, hardens spears and toasts grain. He sees humans shivering in caves and he thinks, hey, maybe they deserve a chance. So he sneaks into Olympus, hides fire in a fennel stalk and delivers it to Earth like a prehistoric Amazon Prime. Zeus is not pleased. This wasn't just disobedience, it was undermining the entire cosmic hierarchy. Humans were meant to be pawns dependent, impressed by the divine. Giving them fire. That's like handing out nuclear codes to cavemen. In Zeus's eyes, it's a disaster in the making. So he decides that punishment is due. Not just for Prometheus, but for humanity as a whole. Enter Operation Pandora. The plan is twistedly poetic. Zeus doesn't just want to take away something humans love. That would be too direct. Instead, he wants to give them a gift, one so alluring, so seemingly perfect, that they'll destroy themselves just by loving it. He orders Hephaestus, the divine smith, to forge the first woman. Not just any woman, but a walking contradiction of charm and chaos. Aphrodite grants her beauty, Athena gives her skill, Hermes teaches her cunning speech, and the Horai dress her in silks and flowers. She is named Pandora, meaning all gifted, and she's sent to Earth not as a blessing, but as a cosmic trap. Let's pause here because historians still argue whether Pandora was meant to be a symbol of hope corrupted or hope misunderstood. The Greek word used for her container is pythos, a large storage jar, not a delicate box. But translations muddle things, and Pandora's box has a nice ring to it, so the box sticks. Either way, Zeus gives Pandora a jar, and one rule: don't open it. So naturally she does, and out comes everything humans have been dreading ever since disease, hunger, jealousy, war, old age, taxes, heartbreak, mismatched socks, every inconvenience and tragedy, all swirling into the world in one chaotic gust. She slams the lid, but it's too late. Only one thing remains, trapped inside hope. That detail, hope trapped in the jar, has divided scholars for centuries. Was it mercy a final gift, or one last cruel joke, implying that even hope is just another trick? Regardless, humanity changes that day. Not through a slow evolutionary crawl, but in one cataclysmic mood swing, courtesy of Zeus's bruised ego. Let's not forget he could have just taken the fire back, or scolded Prometheus, maybe grounded him to a Titan cave. Instead, he decides to weaponize beauty, curiosity, and gift-giving into one masterstroke of cosmic spite. It's a strategy worthy of a daytime soap opera villain, with access to divine blueprints. And here's where the ripple effects get fascinating. Pandora doesn't just introduce suffering, she introduces blame. Her story becomes the blueprint for every future femme fatale myth, a woman whose beauty is matched only by her capacity to ruin things. Never mind that she didn't invent the jar, didn't fill it, and didn't ask to be made. Her curiosity becomes humanity's scapegoat. Sound familiar? Yeah, it's a pattern that echoes all the way down to Eve and that pesky apple. The Greeks aren't subtle here. They're building a worldview. And Zeus. He's at the center smirking in his cloud palace, congratulating himself on a punishment so complex, it disguises itself as generosity. Meanwhile, Prometheus is chained to a rock. Every day, an eagle swoops down to peck out his liver. Every night it regenerates. It's not just pain, it's repetition. Eternal punishment for a moment of compassion. We'll get to more of that later, but for now, just picture Zeus sipping ambrosia, watching it all unfold like a divine Netflix binge. A quirky detail. Some ancient variations say that Zeus ordered 2 jars, made one filled with blessings, the other with curses, and humans opened the wrong one. Imagine that. Somewhere in the back of Olympus, there's an untouched jar of joy, still sealed and collecting dust. Modern comparisons. Think of a tech company gifting you an app that looks helpful, but secretly drains your battery and sells your data. That's Zeus-level generosity. It's the kind that comes with strings, disclaimers, and one unclickable accept terms button at the bottom of destiny. Yet for all the poetic horror of the Pandora story, it also reveals something painfully human. Our tendency to look at gifts with suspicion, to wonder what catches are hidden behind the ribbon. That's the legacy Zeus leaves here, not just suffering, but anxiety. A gnawing sense that every silver lining is hiding a thunderbolt. And still Zeus doesn't stop there. The jar is just the beginning. It's a tool to shift focus, to distract humanity from the real problem, a king who governs from insecurity, not wisdom. Because remember, this wasn't about humans stealing fire. This was about a god being defied. The difference matters. He could have chosen dialogue, understanding, even, dare we say, a little gratitude. After all, humans with fire become more efficient worshippers. They build temples, write hymns, bake sacrificial bread. But no, Zeus isn't thinking long term. He's thinking emotionally, vindictively. dramatically, and humans pay the price. This moment, Pandora the jar. The unfurling horror is one of the oldest cautionary tales in Western culture. It warns not only about curiosity, but about authority, about what happens when power is wielded to punish, not protect, when leadership becomes personal instead of principled. There's one surviving image from a 5th century vase that shows Pandora being gifted to Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother. He accepts her without question. A gift from the gods must be good. The tragic comedy here writes itself. Epimetheus, whose name literally means afterthought, never sees it coming. And so we drift into the smoke of this myth, watching as mankind shivers in its new pain-soaked reality, as rain falls for the first time, as crops fail, as families grieve, all because a god couldn't stand being outmaneuvered. It's almost beautiful in its bitterness, almost. But the true sting. Even Zeus's worst solutions have a certain style to them, a flourish. He doesn't just mess up, he orchestrates disaster like an opera complete with crescendos and costume changes, and yet he rarely faces consequences. That's the Olympian loophole. You can cause chaos on Tuesday and by Wednesday you're back in your sky palace judging mortals for not sacrificing enough rams. So as Pandora closes the lid and curls around that faint glow of hope, humanity learns its first divine lesson. Never trust a gift from a thunder god. The eagle circles overhead, casting a wide shadow across the jagged cliffs of the Caucasus. Below Prometheus lies chained ribs rising and falling with each slow breath. His liver, freshly regrown overnight, is glistening in the morning sun. And as the eagle descends once more, talons extended beak, sharp and eager, the titan doesn't scream. He watches the sky and waits. This is the price of defying Zeus, not just death, but endless repetition of suffering. And Zeus, he watches from Olympus. It's a classic Zeus move, make the punishment more symbolic than practical. Killing Prometheus outright would be merciful. Chaining him to a rock so his liver can be eaten daily for all eternity, that's poetic justice if your poetry leans heavily into horror. But what's especially telling is how much effort Zeus puts into sending a message. Prometheus doesn't just represent rebellion. He represents foresight. His very name means forethought. He didn't just break the rules. He knew what was coming and did it anyway. And this rattles Zeus, because deep down Zeus is not just afraid of rebellion. He's afraid of cleverness, of strategy, of anything that isn't brute force lightning bolts and thunderous proclamations. Historians still argue whether Zeus's punishment of Prometheus was truly about the fire or about Prometheus's prophecy. You see, the Titan knows something Zeus doesn't, a secret about a future child who might overthrow the king of the gods. Prometheus dangles this knowledge like a carrot. He won't tell unless Zeus relents. Zeus naturally does not relent. It becomes a standoff, a test of pride, endurance, and divine ego. Prometheus suffers. Zeus watches. Mortals build their fires and wonder why the stars don't answer. And while this celestial grudge match unfolds, Zeus turns his attention to the next problem on his ever-growing list, humanity again. Because now that fire has empowered mortals, they're getting bold. They're organizing farming, building, living. And Zeus isn't thrilled about that. Civilization to him is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it produces temples and sacrifices. On the other, it breeds independence, so he starts thinning the herd. The mythic ages of man begin to decline conveniently under Zeus's supervision. First comes the Golden Age, ruled by Cronus, no war, no labor, just vibes and eternal springtime. But once Zeus takes over, the gold gives way to silver, then bronze, and eventually iron, a time of toil, violence, and moral decay. Quirky detail. In the Silver Age, people lived 100 years as children, then suddenly died when they finally grew up. Imagine being a rebellious 90-year-old teenager with acne and a wooden sword. Zeus blames humanity for its own decline. But the truth is, every step down this ladder is greased by divine interference. Each time mortals try to rise, he pushes them back down. Fire is just the beginning. Agriculture, language, law, these things worry Zeus. They inch mortals closer to autonomy, and that doesn't sit well with a god who demands obedience. There's a strange modern echo here. Powerful systems fearing the intelligence of the people they claim to protect. The idea that control must be maintained not by guidance, but by suppression. And yet Zeus isn't entirely without heart. Sometimes he feels a pang of regret. He doesn't erase humanity, not yet. He lets them stumble along fighting each other, praising him. When crops are good, cursing him when they're not. But he watches closely, always waiting for the next excuse to intervene. Which brings us to the Great Flood. Zeus, surveying the growing wickedness of mortals, decides it's time for a reset. A cleanse. The world he thinks has gone rotten. And rather than guiding it back, he chooses to drown it. But not without a test. He visits Earth in disguise, a favourite pastime of his, and finds that yes, people are pretty terrible. Murder, theft, disrespect, standard ancient sins. But there's one exception, Deucalion and Pyrrha, the virtuous couple. They're kind, pious, and unfortunately for Zeus's wrath, very much alive. So, in a rare moment of calculated mercy, Zeus spares them. He warns them through the god Prometheus, yes, still chained, still liverless, to build an ark. Sound familiar? It should. This isn't just Greek mythology, it's the blueprint for dozens of global flood myths. The storm comes, seas rise, mountains vanish, the world becomes ocean, and when the rain finally stops, only Deucalion and Pyrrha remain floating on their makeshift boat, blinking into the new silence. Now here's where it gets weird. To repopulate the earth, Zeus doesn't simply let them have children. No, that would be too efficient. Instead, the couple is told to throw the bones of their mother behind them. Interpreting this symbolically because ancient Greeks love a good riddle, they throw stones the bones of Mother Earth. These stones turn into people, and thus humanity is reborn from rocks. Not divine sparks or magic mud rocks, hard, heavy, unfeeling things. It's mythology's way of saying, from now on, people will be resilient, but also a little emotionally unavailable. Zeus, satisfied with his reset, retreats again. But he doesn't address the root of the problem, he never does. He doesn't ask why mortals grow corrupt. He just assumes they're flawed, disposable, in need of correction. It's crisis management without soul-searching, divine bureaucracy at its most thunderous. Meanwhile, the eagle keeps flying. Prometheus still bleeds. And somewhere in the distance, the whisper of his secret, the child who might end all this, is growing louder. Because that's the thing with Zeus. Every overreaction plants the seed of its own undoing. Every punishment sharpens the tools of rebellion. He tries to control the narrative, but in doing so, he only accelerates it. And now, as the new humans walk the earth blinking into the post-flood light, the gods watch from above. The cycle has reset, but it hasn't healed. Because Zeus doesn't heal. He retaliates, he punishes, he resets, but he never reflects. It's like trying to fix a cracked mirror by throwing another rock at it. So next time you hear thunder rumble in the distance, remember, it might not be a storm. It might just be a god fuming over the fact that someone somewhere lit a campfire without asking permission. Zeus wakes up one morning, probably after a dramatic dream involving swans and scandal, and finds that the humans are worshipping him less than usual. Maybe someone didn't offer enough olives. Maybe a shepherd dared to question a lightning strike that burned his goat shed to the ground. Or maybe it's because the people are starting to notice a pattern. When Zeus gets involved, things don't tend to get better, they get theatrical. And speaking of theatrics, this brings us to one of the most baffling chapters in the Zeus Chronicles, the Judgment of Paris. Let's set the scene. Mount Olympus is hosting a divine wedding. The sea goddess Thetis is marrying the mortal Peleus. Big deal. Full guest list. Wine flowing. Gods mingling like it's an immortal gala. Everyone's there except one Eris, goddess of discord. Classic mistake. You don't not invite the goddess of chaos. She's not the type to send regrets and quietly move on. No, she shows up anyway, uninvited and holding a golden apple. On it, she inscribes 3 little words that will change history to the fairest. Then she tosses it into the crowd. And just like that, the party explodes. Hera, queen of the gods, reaches for it. Aphrodite, goddess of love, flashes her signature smile and lays a delicate hand on it. Athena, wisdom, incarnate, steps forward, calculating the trajectory like she's running a physics simulation. 3 goddesses, 1 apple, 1 looming catfight of cosmic proportions. Now here's where Zeus has a golden opportunity. A wise leader would step in, mediate and diffuse the tension. Maybe suggest a tie. Offer each goddess a crown and a compliment. Instead, he does what Zeus always does when faced with a hard choice. He punts it. He chooses not to decide. Instead, he appoints a mortal shepherd named Paris to make the call. That's right. Rather than risking divine wrath himself, Zeus grabs some guy tending goats near Troy and throws him into the middle of a celestial beauty contest. Historians still argue whether Zeus's delegation was strategic cowardice or tactical manipulation. Because Paris is no ordinary shepherd, he's a Trojan prince raised in obscurity because of a prophecy that he'd bring about the fall of his city. And now, thanks to Zeus, he's about to light that prophecy on fire. Each goddess tries to bribe him. Hera offers political power kingship over all of Asia. Athena promises wisdom and unmatched skill in battle. Aphrodite, she offers him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris, being a mortal man with a heartbeat and questionable long-term planning skills, chooses Aphrodite. And thus the apple goes to love. Hera and Athena, insulted and furious, leave in a divine huff, plotting revenge. And the wheels begin to turn. Because the most beautiful woman in the world is Helen, of Sparta, married to Menelaus. Her abduction or elopement, depending on which poet you ask, by Paris, becomes the spark that ignites the Trojan War. Let's pause and appreciate the full absurdity here. Zeus has a problem 3 powerful goddesses are about to throw down over an apple. He could de-escalate. Instead, he hands the situation to a mortal teen with no diplomatic training and watches as a 10-year war unfolds from his non-decision. That's not leadership. That's choosing chaos with sprinkles. This isn't an isolated incident either. Zeus has a habit of outsourcing problems. When things get too messy, he either delegates or disappears. Take the Trojan War itself. Zeus doesn't fight in it. He doesn't lead the gods to peace. He sits back, lets the divine factions split, and watches as mortals kill each other in his name. He's like the CEO who walks into a boardroom fire, throws a match into the filing cabinet, and then blames the interns when the building burns down. A quirky note: some ancient sources say Zeus wanted the Trojan War, that it was his way of thinning the human population again, a divine draft to balance the scales. The war, in that view, wasn't an accident. It was a carefully plotted culling. And if that's true, then handing Paris the apple wasn't laziness. It was a masterstroke of cold mythological calculus. And yet it doesn't feel smart. It feels messy. It feels like someone dodging hard decisions by letting fate or flawed mortals do the dirty work. This whole affair also plants the seeds for future dysfunction on Olympus. Hera and Athena never forget the insult. Their grudge against Troy becomes generational. Aphrodite, smug with victory, doubles down on her favor toward mortals like Paris and Aeneas. The gods become less like forces of nature and more like dysfunctional family members holding on to high school drama for centuries. And through it all, Zeus plays the aloof patriarch. Powerful, yes, but rarely wise. He isn't the god of justice or harmony. He's the god of storms, and storms don't solve problems. They just shake things up and leave someone else to clean the wreckage. Modern comparison time: imagine the leader of a country faced with a brewing international conflict. Rather than negotiating, he holds a reality TV-style contest, lets a teenager pick a side, and then watches the resulting war from a yacht. That's the Judgment of Paris Zeus edition. But what's most telling is how the mortal world absorbs the fallout. The Trojan War becomes a mythic touchstone, a tale of love, betrayal, loyalty, and ruin. And at its root, one indecisive god and a golden apple. It's not that Zeus can't solve problems. It's that his solutions always involve flair over function, ego over empathy. He treats governance like performance art. And while that makes for great myths, it's terrible policy. Remember, this war costs the lives of Achilles, Hector, Patroclus, and countless others. Entire cities burn. Lineages are wiped out. And still Zeus remains above it all, unmoved. Not evil exactly, just incapable of humility. Because here's the truth that mortals and immortals alike keep learning the hard way Zeus doesn't learn. He reacts, he punishes, he improvises. But growth, self-awareness. Those are for humans, not gods. And so Paris returns to Troy with Helen. The Greeks launch 1,000 ships. The war begins. And Zeus. He's probably off somewhere chasing a nymph or transforming into livestock. Because you see, the storm has already started. And for Zeus, that's all he ever really wanted. Somewhere in a sunlit glade, a woman kneels beside a stream. Her hair shimmers like spun moonlight, and the forest hushes itself around her. This is Leto, calm, radiant, and quietly terrified. Because she's pregnant with twins, and their father is Zeus, and Hera knows. The queen of the gods is not one to take betrayal lightly. And betrayal in Hera's eyes includes anything with a pulse that Zeus happens to glance at for more than 5 seconds. Leto isn't the first of Zeus's lovers, nor the last, but her story unfolds like a slow-motion panic attack. Because Hera, instead of confronting her philandering husband, wages war on the woman. And not just any war, a divine, bureaucratic, soul-breaking war of red tape and harassment. Leto, round with child and exhausted, is banned from giving birth on any solid land. Every island, every city, every speck of earth denies her refuge. Not because they hate her, but because they fear Hera's wrath more than they value hospitality. Imagine being so powerful that entire continents pretend not to exist when you knock. Historians still argue whether Hera's campaign against Leto reflects genuine vengeance or a symbolic commentary on the plight of motherhood under patriarchal control. Either way, the result is the same. Leto, divine and glowing with life, becomes a wandering refugee in a world too afraid to shelter her. She finally finds refuge on the floating island of Delos, a rocky drifting scrap of earth that isn't technically land and thus avoids Hera's embargo. It's like finding a tax loophole but for childbirth. And there, under a swaying palm tree with no midwife, no bed, and no applause, she gives birth to Artemis. Then 9 days later to Apollo. The twins come into the world with the quiet fury of survival. Artemis, the huntress, assists with her brother's birth, a newborn midwife. Apollo, radiant and poised, emerges already full of prophecy and song. They are not just children of Zeus, they are instruments of divine backlash. But where is Zeus? Nowhere helpful, of course. He's probably off orchestrating another thunderstorm, or seducing someone disguised as a golden shower. He doesn't lift a finger to help Leto. No lightning bolt clears her path. No decree silences Hera. His children's first taste of the world is hardship, exile, and maternal agony, all because Zeus couldn't keep his tunic on and refused to deal with the consequences. It's an old pattern. Zeus causes the storm, then leaves others to rebuild. And rebuild they do. Apollo and Artemis grow quickly, like divine fast. Within days, they're full-grown, shimmering with power and armed with celestial purpose. Apollo receives his silver bow and the gift of prophecy. Artemis, his twin, claims the wild, the moon, and the art of never needing anyone's approval. A quirky detail, Artemis immediately asks Zeus to grant her eternal virginity, a deer chariot, and a legion of nymphs to hunt with. And surprisingly, Zeus says yes. It's one of the rare moments where he doesn't argue. Maybe he's trying to avoid another future prophecy. Or maybe he's just scared of Artemis because, let's face it, she doesn't mess around. Apollo, meanwhile, becomes Zeus's poster child. Quite literally. He gets Delphi the oracle, the music, the medicine, the sun. Zeus pours approval onto him like it's divine cologne. He even hands over the gift of prophecy, allowing Apollo to speak truths that Zeus himself would rather avoid. But that's the problem with prophecy, it doesn't ask permission. And soon Apollo is forecasting doom, disease, and disobedience. He doesn't serve Zeus, he challenges him softly through riddles and visions. And Zeus, he grows uneasy, because even when his children shine, they cast long shadows. Take Niobe, a queen who boasts about having more children than Leto. 7 sons, 7 daughters beat that goddess of 2. A classic mortal flex. But instead of laughing it off, or offering Leto some extra therapy sessions, Zeus stays silent as his kids go full mythological SWAT team. Artemis slays Niobe's daughters. Apollo cuts down her sons, one by one, with arrows, in broad daylight. It's not justice, it's overkill, and Zeus lets it happen. The message is clear: disrespect a woman scorned by Hera, and her children will erase your family tree. Modern comparison. It's like the CEO's kids showing up at your office because you criticized his mistress in a Slack thread, and then deleting your entire department. And nobody intervenes. Because technically, they didn't break any rules. Historians still debate whether this story is about divine vengeance or ancient values around humility and maternal honor. But for Zeus, it's another instance of silence where intervention might have changed everything. Why doesn't he stop them? Why doesn't he pull Apollo aside and say, maybe don't assassinate children today because Zeus doesn't do nuance? He punishes broadly or not at all. He delegates power, then looks away when it's misused. Even when his own offspring become instruments of tyranny, it happens again with Asclepius, Apollo's son. He learns the art of healing so well that he brings people back from the dead. Mortals start whispering that maybe death isn't so permanent. Maybe the gods aren't the only path to eternity. And Zeus, he panics. Rather than consulting Asclepius or considering the gift's potential, Zeus just hurls a lightning bolt and vaporizes him. Problem solved. Except it isn't. Apollo, heartbroken, retaliates. He kills the Cyclopes who forged the bolt. And Zeus in response exiles his own son. Let that sink in. A healer is murdered for being too good at healing, his father is punished for grieving, and the king of the gods learns nothing. It's divine parenting at its absolute finest. This is the pattern that repeats again and again. Zeus creates power, fears it, then destroys it. He's not a leader. He's a panic button in a toga, and yet despite it all, the world continues to orbit him. Mortals still sacrifice at his temples. Poets still sing his name. Not because he's good, but because he's in charge. There's a kind of twisted beauty in that. Like a storm you can't stop, only endure. And now the twins Apollo and Artemis stand tall. One illuminating truth and future. The other cloaked in wildness and quiet judgment. They are Zeus's legacy, yes, but they are also his reckoning. Because for every thunderbolt he throws, they carry a mirror. And one day he'll have to look into it. By now, even the clouds above Olympus are beginning to side-eye Zeus. One might assume with all these divine missteps behind him, apple contests, twin-born vengeance and scorched healers, that Zeus might take a breath, reassess and attempt leadership with some semblance of foresight. But of course that's not his brand. Tonight we move from floating islands and flaming bolts to something more subtle, more domestic. A small matter, really. Zeus decides to build a wife. Well, technically, remarry. But that implies mutual agreement, and Hera, fierce majestic, and probably sick of everyone's nonsense, is hardly an eager bride. Let's go back. After overthrowing Cronus, the Olympians begin reshaping the cosmos. Zeus divvies up the universe with Poseidon and Hades like they're slicing a pizza. He keeps the sky, Poseidon gets the sea, and Hades ends up with the underworld, possibly because he missed the meeting. With that sorted, Zeus turns to the matter of a queen. There's no shortage of goddesses to choose from. But Zeus, with his usual flair for irony, settles on Hera, his sister. And while modern audiences may raise eyebrows in mythological circles, this is less shocking than it sounds. Divine family trees are more tangled than a phone charger in a junk drawer. Still, the match isn't exactly smooth. Hera resists. She sees Zeus for what he is. Powerful, yes, but unsteady. And she's not wrong. But Zeus, true to form, doesn't address her concerns. He doesn't plead or reason, or heaven forbid reflect. He shapeshifts into a wounded bird and crashes into her arms. Yes, really. He fakes injury, as a cuckoo. And when Hera moved by pity cradles the little creature Zeus transforms back and... Well, the myths vary here, but the result is the same: she agrees to marry him. Historians still argue whether this moment symbolizes divine union or a cosmic cautionary tale about emotional manipulation. Either way, the tone is set. Their marriage begins with ceremony and lightning. Hera becomes queen of Olympus, radiant and sharp-eyed. But any illusions of romantic bliss are quickly buried under a mountain of infidelity. Zeus doesn't change. If anything, marriage seems to embolden his wandering thunderbolt. And yet Hera doesn't leave. She doesn't destroy him, though she certainly could. Instead, she becomes a master of endurance and retaliation. This is where the story takes its quiet, coiled turn, because Hera doesn't fight Zeus head-on. She can't. Not without breaking the very balance of Olympus. So instead, she fights him sideways, through mortals, through symbols, through his children. Every time Zeus strays, Hera strikes not at him, but at the results. Letto io semele alcmene. The list of mortal women caught in their divine crossfire is longer than the Iliad, and Hera becomes their nightmare. She turns them into cows, curses their wombs, sends serpents after their babies. It's not kindness, but it's understandable. One quirky detail in some versions of the myth: Hera invents childbirth pain. Not because she hates women, but because she wants to balance the scales of divine pregnancy. A sort of mythological tax reform. You want to birth a god. Here's a taste of mortal agony. And what does Zeus do during all this nothing corrective? Nothing conciliatory. He reacts to Hera's wrath like a sitcom husband who forgets every anniversary. He deflects. He storms off. Sometimes he even chains her to the heavens, like when she rebels against his authority and tries to lead a divine coup. That's right. Hera, with the help of Poseidon and Athena, once tries to overthrow Zeus. They almost succeed too. They bind him in his sleep. But Zeus, saved by a 100-handed giant, yes, that's a thing, regains control and punishes them. Hera is hung from the sky in golden shackles. It's a breathtaking image, Sky Queen suspended between storm and silence. And it speaks volumes. This isn't a marriage. It's a power struggle wrapped in wedding vows. Modern comparison. It's like if your boss was also your spouse and fired you every time you disagreed, but made you still show up to dinner. There's a reason so many scholars refer to Hera and Zeus as the original toxic power couple. But Hera isn't just a victim. She's a strategist. When she's not punishing Zeus's lovers, she's guiding heroes. She backs Jason in his quest for the Golden Fleece. She aids Greeks during the Trojan War. She uses her rage as leverage, her grudges as weapons. Zeus, meanwhile, continues his usual spiral, starting fires, then watching them burn. A particularly delicious example is the birth of Hephaestus, the god of fire and forge. In one version, Hera births him alone without Zeus, just to prove she can. But when she sees that he's born lame, she hurls him from Olympus in disgust. The irony: Hephaestus lands on Earth, crafts wonders, and later becomes the very artisan who builds Olympus's thrones. He's also married off to Aphrodite by Zeus, because what better way to secure peace than forcing your injured brilliant son into a loveless marriage with the goddess of desire? Guess what happens? She cheats with Ares, repeatedly, messily. Zeus naturally doesn't fix it. Instead, he lets Hephaestus set a trap, a golden net that ensnares the adulterous couple mid-affair, exposing them to the laughter of all Olympus. It's mythological reality TV. No one learns, no one heals, but it's spectacularly dramatic. And through all of it, Hera remains. She stays on her throne, wears her crown and seethes. Sometimes she smiles. More often, she plots. Because here's the truth behind the marriage of Zeus and Hera. It's not about love. It's about order. She represents structure, tradition, the divine bureaucracy of the cosmos. Zeus is chaos wrapped in muscle and lightning. Together they keep the world balanced, not because they agree, but because neither can afford to lose. And that's what makes it tragic, because somewhere beneath the thunder and resentment there was potential. Two powers equally vast could have ruled in harmony. But Zeus never saw Hera as an equal. He saw her as containment, as opposition, as something to outmaneuver. So he never confided, never collaborated. He just dodged, cheated, exploded and repeated. And Hera, for all her fury, adapted. She became the check on his worst impulses, not by stopping them, but by surviving them. Which brings us to a strange scholarly debate. Is Hera the villain of these myths, or is she the only god on Olympus playing by the rules of consequence? Because Zeus never suffers. Not directly. He throws thunder at problems and walks away. But Hera, she endures them all. She holds on to every insult, every betrayal. She remembers. She waits. And waiting in Olympus is power. So when mortals look to the sky and see a clear day, they thank Zeus. But when they see Structure City's marriage law, they owe it to Hera. And yet she is always secondary, always wife of, never the lightning, only the echo. But oh, what an echo she leaves behind. By this point the gods have grown weary, but mortals are just getting interesting. Civilizations sprout like spring weeds across the Mediterranean Mycenaeans, Minoans. Then those rowdy Greeks with their theatre masks and olive wreaths. They pray, they sacrifice, they build temples with columns so pristine, even Zeus might glance down and raise an approving eyebrow. But don't be fooled. Zeus doesn't really care about temples, not in the way mortals think. He isn't scanning clouds looking for piety. He's still up there wrapped in thunder and poor decision-making eyeing Earth like it's his personal dating app. Tonight we witness the full fallout of that habit, because while mortals pray for rain, Zeus is busy falling in love. Again, and again, and again, with mortals, with nymphs, with the occasional abstraction. Seriously, he once pursues Nemesis, the goddess of retribution. Talk about red flags, but no love story or disaster shines quite as brightly as the saga of Semele. Semele is mortal, a princess of Thebes. Beautiful, of course, but also devout. She worships Zeus with the kind of sincerity that makes the gods slightly uncomfortable. So naturally, Zeus notices. And once he notices, it's only a matter of time before he descends. He doesn't introduce himself as a god, of course. That would be too straightforward. Instead, he visits her in disguise, seduces her, slowly cloaks his identity until it's too late for her to run. And when Semele becomes pregnant, she is exalted and doomed, because someone else notices too. Hera. And if you thought Hera's vengeance toward Leto was cruel, brace yourself. This is where things get ice cold. She disguises herself as an old woman, befriends Semele, and starts planting seeds of doubt. "Are you sure it's really Zeus?" she whispers, sipping imaginary tea. Seems strange, doesn't it? He never visits in the same form, never reveals his divine nature. If he truly loves you, wouldn't he show you who he is? And Semele, young human pregnant, starts to wonder. She asks for proof. One night when Zeus appears cloaked in shadow and charm, Semele makes her request. "Reveal yourself," she says. "Show me your true form." Zeus hesitates. He knows what this means. No mortal can look upon a god in their full radiance and live. But he swore on the river Styx, an oath even he can't break. So he agrees, and with a crack of light, a roar of cosmic thunder, he becomes himself, lightning incarnate, majesty unbearable, and Semele burns. Not symbolically, literally. She is incinerated by the truth of the thing she loved. Now pause. This is the perfect moment for Zeus to change, to reflect, to grieve. But Zeus doesn't. He does, however, rescue the unborn child from her ashes. With precision only a god can muster, he sews the fetus into his thigh. Yes, his thigh. And a few months later, from his immortal flesh, is born Dionysus, god of wine madness and rebirth. A child born twice, a child of fire and folly. Historians still argue whether Dionysus represents chaos or catharsis, whether he's the embodiment of divine intoxication or the only sane one on Olympus. What's undeniable is that his birth signals something new, a turning point in myth. A god who walks among mortals, drinks with them, stumbles with them, sings with them. And this god comes from Zeus's greatest miscalculation, a quirky detail. When Dionysus grows up, he doesn't stay on Olympus. He wanders, gains followers, invents wine, teaches mortals to lose control. And when Hera inevitably tries to kill him because of course she does, Zeus hides him in Mount Nysa, disguised as a girl raised by nymphs. His childhood is a blur of disguises, escapes and vine leaves. And yet Dionysus thrives. He becomes one of the most beloved gods, joyous, unpredictable, divine, but earthy. Everything Zeus is not. Because Dionysus listens. He revels, but he also mourns. He understands pain, understands loss. Maybe because he was born of both. Meanwhile, Zeus continues his cycle. Alcmene, Danae, Europa. He descends upon them like a moth toward a lantern, sometimes a bull, sometimes a shower of gold, sometimes an eagle. Each story ends the same: a son is born. A mortal woman is changed forever. Danae, imprisoned in a tower, receives Zeus as rain. From this impossible pairing comes Perseus, the slayer of Medusa, rescuer of Andromeda. But Danae is exiled, cast adrift in a chest with her infant. Zeus doesn't intervene. Europa is abducted while picking flowers. Zeus, in the form of a white bull, carries her across the sea to Crete. She becomes a queen, yes, but she never goes home. And then there's Alcmene. She's wise, reluctant, married to another man. Zeus disguises himself as her husband, prolongs the night to last 3 times longer than usual, and fathers Heracles, who will in time become a god through suffering and labor. But Alcmene pays the price. Hera sends serpents to her cradle, curses her labor, haunts her son with madness, and Zeus, silent again. The irony, he later deifies Heracles, builds temples in his name, as if to say all is forgiven without ever apologizing for the pain that led there. This is Zeus's version of growth retroactive glory. He never prevents the wound, he just ensures the scar becomes a legend. Modern comparison. It's like if someone pushed you off a cliff, then built a museum in your honor at the bottom. Technically respectful, deeply unhelpful. And yet, despite the chaos, mortals don't stop worshipping him. They climb mountains to glimpse his domain, offer bulls and barley at his altars. Not because he's merciful, but because he's unignorable. He is lightning. He is law. He is the storm that never apologizes. But there's something else happening here too. Slowly the myths begin to shift. The mortals grow bolder. Heroes start questioning the gods. Odysseus defies Poseidon. Prometheus dares to steal fire. And somewhere in that rising doubt, one begins to wonder how long can Zeus keep ruling through fear and flattery? Because gods, like empires, rise on belief and crumble on doubt. We've seen Zeus burn lovers, father demigods, and retreat from the consequences like a politician on vacation. But perhaps nowhere is his flawed judgment more jaw-droppingly showcased than in the tale of Prometheus. Tonight, we light a fire literally and figuratively, and settle into the story of how Zeus tried to suppress progress, got outwitted by a clever titan, and ended up punishing the very act that made humans human. Let's back up. Prometheus is a titan, technically older than Zeus. But when the Olympians overthrow Cronus and take control, Prometheus sides with the new gods. It's a savvy move, think of it as switching political parties just before an election landslide. Zeus rewards him sort of, but never really trusts him. Prometheus, after all, is clever. Too clever. He watches the new regime with wary eyes, and he notices something: the gods are flourishing, but mortals, not so much. No fire, no tools, no cooked food, no iPhones, just wet shivering and half blind in the cold night. Prometheus decides that's unacceptable, so he tricks Zeus. During a feast between gods and men, Prometheus performs a sleight of hand. He disguises bones in glistening fat and hides the good meat under gristle and skin. When asked to choose which offering the gods will receive forever, Zeus picks the pile of glittering fat and bone. The gods are stuck with it, humans get the meat. It's a prank of cosmic proportions, one that flavors sacrificial rites for centuries. Historians still argue whether this trick was meant to empower mortals or to subtly dethrone Zeus. Either way, Zeus is humiliated. So he retaliates in the pettiest way possible. He takes fire away from mankind. No more warmth, no more cooked food. Just cold nights and darkness, like a landlord cutting power because you played your music too loud. But Prometheus isn't done. He sneaks into Olympus, lights a torch from the sun, and brings fire back to humanity. Fire, the original rebellion. A quirky detail here, Prometheus doesn't just steal fire, he delivers it in a fennel stalk. It's strangely specific and strangely clever. Fennel with its hollow stem becomes the first mythological USB drive. This moment echoes through time. Fire becomes the symbol of knowledge, of progress, of divine defiance. Humans begin to rise, build, shape, burn, and Zeus loses control. Naturally, he's furious, but he doesn't lash out immediately. He plans, slowly, meticulously. First, he orders the creation of Pandora. Not just a woman, a weapon, a punishment wrapped in beauty. He has the gods craft her from clay. Aphrodite gives her charm. Hermes gives her cunning. Athena teaches her to weave. She is perfect, and perfectly dangerous. He then gifts her to Epimetheus, Prometheus's less bright brother. Despite Prometheus explicitly warning him never accept gifts from Zeus, Epimetheus of course accepts immediately. Possibly within 5 minutes, he marries her. And Pandora comes with a jar. Not a box, that's a Renaissance translation error, but a wide clay jar filled with all the evils of the world. Disease, war, famine, envy, taxes, probably. She opens it. All of it escapes, except one thing, hope. Hope stays inside. Some scholars debate whether that's mercy or cruelty. Did Zeus let hope remain to comfort mankind, or to taunt them to prolong their suffering with a cruel illusion of light? Either way, the damage is done. Humanity is punished, not just for stealing fire, but for daring to outwit a god. And Prometheus? Zeus chains him to a mountain. Every day an eagle arrives. It tears open his chest and eats his liver. Every night it grows back. Immortal torment. Infinite digestion. Modern comparison. It's like being stuck in a perpetual Monday with an inbox full of spam and no vacation days. But here's the twist. Even in punishment, Prometheus wins, because mankind keeps the fire. Pandora's jar may unleash horror, but it also teaches humans resilience, struggle, art, medicine, humor. And Prometheus, chained but unbroken, becomes a symbol not just of rebellion, but of consequence. And Zeus. Once again, he chooses control over connection. He responds to cleverness with violence. Instead of negotiating, he punishes. Instead of evolving, he entrenches. It's not a leadership style, it's a tantrum with thunderbolts. But something is shifting now. The gods aren't as unquestioned as they once were. Heroes begin to take center stage. Mortal names echo alongside divine ones: Perseus, Theseus, Heracles. All children of gods, but shaped by human pain. Zeus watches it unfold like a director whose actors have started improvising. And speaking of actors, remember Hephaestus, the lame god Hera threw from Olympus. He's the one who forged Prometheus's chains. The same god who was cast aside becomes the maker of divine punishment. Irony is thicker than ambrosia on Mount Olympus, but Hephaestus doesn't enjoy it. In many tellings, he weeps while forging the shackles, because even gods can hate their jobs. Another unexpected echo, Hercules, Zeus's own son, is the one who eventually frees Prometheus. He slays the eagle, breaks the chains, and ends the cycle. Zeus allows it. Barely. Some say he only agrees because Prometheus finally reveals a secret, that Zeus is destined to be overthrown by a son, should he ever lie with a certain sea goddess. That sea goddess is Thetis. Zeus immediately arranges for her to marry a mortal. Problem solved. Future Olympian coup avoided. This is peak Zeus: make a mess, let someone else clean it, then step in at the end and pretend it was all strategy. But the pattern is undeniable now. Every time Zeus tries to control the future by hiding fire, destroying knowledge, punishing progress, it slips through his fingers. He's trying to lead a universe that won't stop evolving. A god stuck in a world that's learning, burning, changing. And his worst decisions, they always stem from fear. Fear of being outsmarted, outloved, outshone. So he lashes out. He builds thunder prisons. He births consequences, and still humanity rises. Because once fire is lit, it never truly goes out. The thing about thunder is after a while you start to tune it out. Mortals have grown used to Zeus. They still tremble when the skies open up, sure, but somewhere deep down they've learned not to expect wisdom from the lightning. Just volume. And nowhere is this more obvious than in the story of the Trojan War. Yes, that Trojan War. 10 years. 1,000 ships. Horse with a hollow middle. You probably know the broad strokes. But tonight, we're focusing on the part people usually skip over, because once again, it all begins with Zeus making the worst possible choice in the worst possible way. It starts like many disasters do with a wedding. Peleus, a mortal king, is marrying Thetis, a sea goddess. She's the one Zeus didn't seduce after learning she'd bear a son greater than his father. Remember that. Congratulations, this is the fallout. All the gods are invited to the wedding, except one. Eris, goddess of discord. And if you've ever planned a wedding, you know leaving someone off the guest list is practically an invitation to chaos. Eris crashes the party, tosses a golden apple onto the banquet table. Inscribed on it are 3 deadly words for the fairest. A silence falls, then a ripple. 3 goddesses reach for it. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. 3 of the most powerful beings in existence, none of whom are known for their humility. Zeus, who could have diffused the situation with a little diplomacy or, I don't know, not throwing women into divine cage matches, refuses to choose between them. Instead, he kicks the question down to earth. He selects a mortal shepherd named Paris, yes, that Paris, to judge the divine beauty pageant. Let's take a moment here. Zeus has 3 angry goddesses, each more volatile than the last, and instead of handling it himself, he sends the problem to a teenage boy who's been raised on sheep and flutes. It's like assigning a high school freshman to moderate a presidential debate. What could possibly go wrong? Each goddess bribes Paris. Hera offers power. Athena offers wisdom and victory in war. Aphrodite offers the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. And Paris unsurprisingly chooses Aphrodite. He's a teenage boy. The most beautiful woman in the world is Helen. Unfortunately, she's already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. But that doesn't stop Aphrodite. She whisks Helen away, either willingly or under enchantment, depending on the version, and brings her to Troy. And with that, the war begins. 10 years of bloodshed, cities burned, heroes fall, all because Zeus couldn't be bothered to make a decision with grace. Historians still argue whether the story of Troy is myth-fact or some murky blend of both. The ruins of a city do exist in modern-day Turkey, and there's evidence of a major conflict around 1200 BCE. But whether Paris truly judged 3 goddesses or Helen's face actually launched ships, that's up for debate. What's not up for debate is that Zeus could have prevented all of it. Instead, he leans into the drama. He lets the gods take sides, Hera and Athena, backing the Greeks' Aphrodite, and Ares, backing the Trojans. He watches like an executive producer sipping nectar, letting his family tear each other to pieces. At one point he even considers saving his son Sarpedon, who fights for the Trojans. But the fates say no, so Zeus lets him die weeping thunder. He's powerful enough to change the rules, but only when it suits him. And when it doesn't, he hides behind fate, like a kid claiming the dog ate his homework. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, mortals suffer. Achilles loses Patroclus and goes berserk. Hector dies dragged behind a chariot. The gods keep interfering, causing storms, tossing boulders, changing the outcome of duels like bored gamers with cheat codes. But no one interferes more erratically than Zeus. He flips loyalties, delivers contradictory commands. Even Poseidon gets fed up and storms off at one point. It's like watching a CEO micromanage a company he doesn't understand while insisting he's letting the team take ownership. And when the war finally ends, after Odysseus's wooden horse gambit, after Priam begs for mercy, and the Greeks reduce Troy to ash, Zeus pretends it was inevitable. But there's something deeply uncomfortable in the silence afterward, a quirky detail. At the moment Troy falls, some myths say, Cassandra, the doomed prophetess, screams the truth. She'd seen it all coming, warned everyone, but no one believed her. That's her curse, always right, never heard. And honestly, she might be the truest voice in this entire war. Because Cassandra knows something Zeus doesn't. Power isn't about thunderbolts, it's about responsibility. And here again, Zeus fails. He started the war with inaction. He escalated it with delegation. He prolonged it with vanity. And once it's over, he learns nothing. He doesn't rebuild Troy. He doesn't reward those who suffered. He simply moves on back to Olympus to find the next mess to either ignore or ignite. But the mortals remember. They start to notice that the gods aren't perfect, that their stories are full of blunders and grudges, that Zeus, their king, isn't wise, just loud. And in the centuries that follow, something subtle starts to shift. Poets begin to write tragedies, not just hymns. Thinkers start to question the gods' ethics. Philosophers like Xenophanes quietly suggest that maybe, just maybe, the gods are human inventions, reflections of ourselves with bigger appetites and better hair. It's the beginning of a slow erosion, a quiet rebellion, not with swords but with questions. Because once a god's decisions stop making sense, mortals stop calling them gods. By the time Zeus decides to flood the entire planet, it's clear his solution-making strategy leans heavily on spectacle over subtlety. Mortals, as usual, are behaving badly. And not just the usual garden variety mortal mischief, this time they've gone full nihilist. There's lawlessness, violence, impiety. Human arrogance reaches such heights that Zeus feels personally offended, which is impressive, considering he's spent most of his immortal life proving he's the undisputed champion of hubris. The final straw, a king named Lycaon. A man of significant ego and very little sense decides to test whether Zeus is truly a god. He invites him to dinner as one does when trying to vet a deity, and serves him, wait for it, a dish made from the roasted remains of a human child. This Lycaon thinks will reveal Zeus's true nature. If he eats the flesh, he's just a man. If he knows what it is and is horrified, well, then he's divine. Zeus, to his credit, passes the test. But instead of simply punishing Lycaon and moving on, he turns the man into a wolf, because of course he flips over the banquet table and declares humanity broken beyond repair. So naturally he opts for complete annihilation. He sends storms. Rain pours from the sky in sheets. Rivers overflow. The oceans surge up as if Poseidon himself is leaning into the destruction out of sibling solidarity. For 9 days and nights the world drowns. It's not a surgical strike, it's a blunt force cosmic erasure. And once again, Zeus proves that his solutions rarely match the size or shape of the problem. Historians still argue whether this flood myth is linked to real events. Some point to a massive deluge in the Black Sea region around 5600 BCE as a possible inspiration. Others say it's simply a moral fable about divine justice. But either way, the story reflects a consistent theme Zeus doesn't fix. He wipes. Yet amid the ruin, two figures survive, Deucalion and Pyrrha. They're the Greek version of Noah and his unnamed wife, though their boat is more metaphor than architectural blueprint. Some myths say Prometheus, Deucalion's Titan father, warned him in time to build a chest or ark. Others claim Zeus simply spared the pair for their piety. Either way, they float above the deluge like a drifting memory of the world that was. A quirky detail here: when the waters finally recede, Deucalion and Pyrrha don't start repopulating the world in the usual way. Instead, they consult the oracle of Themis, who tells them cryptically to throw the bones of their mother over their shoulders. And because Greek myth thrives on riddles and double meanings, they realize she doesn't mean literal bones. Mother is Gaia, the earth. The bones are stones. So they pick up rocks, toss them over their shoulders, and watch as the stones transform into people, men from Deucalion's stones, women from Pyrrha's. It's strange, it's poetic, it's peak mythology. And it's a perfect example of how even in the aftermath of one of Zeus's most sweeping disasters, the recovery effort depends on human cleverness and interpretation, not divine guidance. Because Zeus, after the flood, pretty much ghosts the scene. No rebuilding program, no apology tour. He doesn't even send a rainbow. He simply disappears into the thunderclouds, satisfied that the filth has been scrubbed away. The survivors, meanwhile, live with the knowledge that their god might one day erase them again, not for what they did, but because someone else fed him long pig at a dinner party. It's a hard truth: when the king of the gods has a short fuse and a long memory, even good people sleep with one eye on the sky. From a modern perspective, Zeus's flood reads like a Control-Alt-Delete for the species. But even ancient listeners must have found it unsettling. Why does an omnipotent God need to hit the reset button? Why not course correct with education guidance? Or maybe just a really stern celestial memo? The truth may be that Zeus doesn't want to manage. He wants obedience. The flood then isn't justice, it's domination. And the fact that he spares only 2 people enough to restart civilization, but not enough to challenge divine power, feels less like mercy and more like micromanagement. Remember that quirky moment with the stones? It's not just folklore, it reveals something important about the myth's worldview. In Greek cosmology, humans aren't made in the image of gods. They're pulled from the earth rough and inanimate, made human by chance and necessity. No divine blueprint, just rocks. And yet Zeus seems to believe they owe him eternal loyalty. This is the paradox of the flood. It was meant to reassert Zeus's dominance. But instead, it plants seeds of doubt. Mortals begin to tell stories not just about his might, but about his unpredictability. About the line between justice and vengeance blurring in the rain. Over time, the flood becomes a cautionary tale. Not just about impiety, but about trusting power that doesn't explain itself. Some philosophers in later centuries like Xenophanes and much later Plato would begin to question whether such a god was truly wise or just tyrannical. If justice should be measured by outcomes, not thunderclaps. The myth also exposes Zeus's worst habit, overcorrection. He sees a problem, panics, and swings the pendulum too far. Mortals sin, wipe them all out. Paris can't choose a goddess. Start a 10-year war. Prometheus steals fire. Chain him to a mountain for eternity. There's no middle gear, no listening session, no olive branch, just lightning. A final thought: in some versions of the flood, there's an implication that Zeus regrets it. That he watches the water swallow the world and feels for the briefest moment a flicker of remorse. But if that's true, he hides it well. He never says sorry, never promises not to do it again. He just waits, thunder rumbling softly until the next storm needs summoning. And the mortals glancing up at cloudy skies carry on, because they have no choice. They rebuild from rocks, from myth, from silence. The skies have barely dried from the flood, before Zeus barrels into his next disaster, the myth of Niobe, a queen whose only crime was a little too much pride, and perhaps not understanding Zeus's family's severe lack of chill. Niobe is the daughter of Tantalus the king, with a knack for tormenting the gods and himself in increasingly imaginative ways. Her bloodline alone suggests caution, but Niobe is also a queen in her own right, powerful, regal, and most importantly, a mother. A prolific one at that. Depending on the version, she has 6, 12, or even 14 children, equal numbers of sons and daughters. They're strong, healthy, radiant. She's proud, loudly so. And that's where the thunder starts to gather. Niobe in her pride makes a fatal comparison. She mocks Leto, the quiet, reserved titaness who bore Zeus 2 children, Apollo and Artemis. Niobe points out quite logically that she's done more than Leto. More children, more success, more fertility. Why should people worship Leto when Niobe has clearly produced a small city of gorgeous offspring? From a modern lens, Niobe's statement feels more like a casual brag than a divine offense. It's the equivalent of a Facebook post saying feeling blessed with my beautiful kiddos. But in a pantheon where reputation is sacred and grudges are Olympic sport, her words detonate. Leto doesn't speak. She doesn't shout. She doesn't even descend from Olympus. Instead, she sends her children. Apollo and Artemis glide down like silent storm fronts. No warnings, no confrontation, just arrows. They slaughter Niobe's children. All of them. In most tellings, Artemis slays the daughters. Apollo, the sons. The killings are swift and clinical, a grim ballet of divine precision. One moment, the royal palace is filled with laughter and play. The next, it's blood and silence. Only 1 or 2 children survive, depending on the version. Either the youngest daughter or a particularly quick-footed son escapes the wrath. The rest are left as reminders of what happens when a mortal forgets their place in the cosmic hierarchy. And Zeus? Well, technically, he's not directly involved. This is his family's vendetta, executed with lethal efficiency by his children. But once again, It's Zeus's refusal to mediate to temper divine overreaction that causes catastrophe. He could have intervened. He could have told Apollo and Artemis to let it go, to act with grace. Instead, he watches, silently. Historians still argue whether the myth of Niobe was intended as a cautionary tale about humility, or whether it was a deeper commentary on the fragility of motherhood in a violent world. Some scholars even suggest it represents the clash between the old earth goddess traditions, fertility and abundance, and the Olympian cults of order and restraint. A quirky detail: after the massacre, Niobe flees to Mount Sisyphus. There, overcome with grief, she weeps endlessly until the gods, either pitying her or simply wishing to silence the sound, turn her into stone. To this day, travelers claim to see a rock formation in the shape of a weeping woman with water trickling like tears. The Greeks called it the Weeping Rock, and the legend stuck. But what makes this another installment in Zeus's worst decisions isn't just the tragedy, it's the message it sends. Niobe's crime was pride, not rebellion, not violence, not deceit, just pride, and the punishment complete erasure of her family. It tells mortals that even joy, even celebration must be muted in the face of divine egos, that anything above quiet reverence is seen as threat. Modern equivalent. Imagine if someone posted "My kid won a soccer tournament" and a government agency responded by demolishing their house for showing off. It's an absurd overreach, and yet in Olympus it's normal. Zeus's silence, his tacit approval, casts a long shadow. It means the gods can act without restraint. It means mortals must censor joy. It's an ancient version of walking on eggshells, while thunderclouds gather overhead. What's worse, the myth offers no real redemption. Niobe isn't warned. She isn't offered a chance to apologize. There's no lesson, just a sentence. And this creates a toxic precedent in mythology. After the flood and the Niobe episode, mortals begin to understand that the gods don't educate, they retaliate. They don't guide, they punish. Zeus, far from being a shepherd, is more like a storm fence. He doesn't keep people safe, he keeps them in line. The moral architecture of his world isn't about justice, it's about fear. And this changes the way humans tell stories. They begin to include warnings in their tales. Don't speak out of turn. Don't question divine choices. Don't compare. Don't exceed. Don't. There's a quiet bleakness to it, the same way you'd feel in a house where someone is always listening. A sense that love or pride must always come with a caveat, as long as the gods don't notice. And that is a kind of spiritual erosion. But Zeus, high on Olympus, seems unbothered. Perhaps he thinks his silence shows wisdom, that restraint equals leadership. But true restraint would mean telling Apollo and Artemis no, would mean shielding mortals, even flawed ones, from disproportionate wrath. Instead, he lets his children learn vengeance without limits, and mortals already small become smaller still. A final quirky twist in some versions: after Niobe turns to stone, she still weeps. An eternal statue crying for children who once laughed in palace halls. It's one of the earliest mythological depictions of grief as unending. Not even death or transformation can ease it. And that might be the truest tragedy in Zeus's long list of mistakes. Not the thunder, not the flood, not the arrow storms, but the silence after. Because what Niobe needed wasn't punishment, it was empathy. And that, it seems, is the one thing Zeus has never learned to summon. By now it's clear that if there's a path marked moderation, Zeus runs the other way usually, while flinging lightning over his shoulder for good measure. So when the issue of honor comes up, particularly his own, you can bet the worst possible response is incoming. And that brings us to the epic misstep, otherwise known as the Judgment of Paris, a celestial beauty contest that ends in a decade-long war, countless deaths, and the total incineration of Troy. It starts at a wedding, always a great place for drama. Peleus and Thetis, soon to be parents of Achilles, are tying the knot. All the gods are invited, except one, Eris, goddess of discord, and honestly, leaving her out seems wise. But exclusion comes with consequences, especially when you're dealing with a divine being whose whole identity is stirring up chaos like it's artisanal hummus. Eris crashes the party anyway and rolls a golden apple across the banquet table, engraved on it, "To the fairest." Cue the goddesses side-eyeing each other like contestants at the Miss Olympus pageant. 3 step forward: Aphrodite, Hera, Athena. Each claims the apple is meant for her. Each believes herself the fairest. And because no one dares judge between them on Olympus, not even Zeus, they turn to a mortal to decide. And that's mistake number 1, outsourcing a divine conflict to someone who buys cheese with bronze coins. Paris, a Trojan prince with a reputation for beauty and sheep herding, is chosen for the impossible task. The 3 goddesses don't exactly play fair. Each tries to bribe him. Hera offers power kingship over all of Asia. Athena offers wisdom and military glory. But Aphrodite plays the long game. She offers him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta. And Paris predictably chooses Aphrodite. You can practically hear the thunder building in the background. Because here's the thing. Paris's choice doesn't just bruise egos. It ignites vendettas. Hera and Athena take the slight personally, and for goddesses, that means declaring open season on Paris Troy and everyone remotely connected to them. Historians still argue whether this myth originated as a political allegory, possibly to explain tensions between competing Greek city-states, or if it was just a convenient plot device to kick off the Trojan War saga. But either way, it perfectly captures the theme of divine pettiness and Zeus's trademark solution style, delegate and detonate. He could have stepped in. As king of the gods, he might have said, hey, maybe we don't need to weaponize a beauty contest. But no. Zeus punts the decision to a mortal dodging the issue like a celestial CEO avoiding an HR complaint. And it backfires spectacularly. Helen is, of course, already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. But Paris, emboldened by Aphrodite's promise, sails to Sparta and whisks her away either by charm or by force, depending on the version. This single act, driven by divine manipulation, plunges the Greek world into chaos. Armies rally, ships launch, 10 years of siege begin. Thousands die, and all because Zeus didn't want to get involved in a squabble over who's prettier at a party. Now there is a wrinkle. Some ancient versions suggest Zeus wanted this to happen, that the war was part of his long-term population control plan. Mortals were growing too numerous, too noisy. A massive war would thin the herd. If that's true, it makes his decision not just careless, but calculated. A quirky detail here, Helen, in some tellings, never even makes it to Troy. According to the playwright, Euripides, the real Helen, is whisked away to Egypt, and a phantom and illusion crafted by the gods is taken to Troy instead. It's the ultimate cosmic prank, a war fought over a woman who isn't even there. But regardless of the version, the outcome is the same tragedy, betrayal, and an entire city burned to ashes. Once again, Zeus's hands are conspicuously clean. He doesn't lift a finger to prevent the war. Doesn't punish Aphrodite for manipulating Paris. Doesn't scold Hera or Athena for fanning the flames. He just watches. From his throne on Olympus, he sees a generation of heroes march to their doom. He sees Achilles slay Hector Odysseus, build the Trojan horse, and Priam beg for his son's body. He sees a world unravel, and he lets it happen. This is what makes the judgment of Paris one of Zeus's worst solutions. He avoids immediate conflict by planting a time bomb in mortal affairs. It's passive destruction. It's letting your housemates argue over who left the dishes out, then lighting the curtains on fire so no one wins. Modern equivalent. Imagine your boss lets 3 department heads fight over a promotion and tells an intern to choose, then acts shocked when the company collapses into workplace warfare. There's no strategy, no foresight, just evasion dressed as wisdom. And maybe that's Zeus's deepest flaw, not the fury, not the ego, but the belief that stepping aside is the same as stepping above. Because it's not. Power without accountability is just abandonment. The Trojan War leaves scars across generations. Even the survivors like Odysseus are cursed to wander. The gods argue, manipulate, betray. And Zeus, the so-called ruler of Olympus, sits there nodding sagely, as if all of this somehow proves his greatness. But all it proves is that he'd rather let others burn than face discomfort himself. A final reflection, the golden apple, with its smooth gleaming surface, becomes the perfect symbol of the problem. It's beautiful, alluring, and completely hollow. Much like Zeus's leadership at this point, he might wear the crown, he might command the thunder. But when the world needs wisdom, all he offers is silence and a front row seat to the fallout. The smoke of Troy still rises in the distance when Zeus once again decides to parent with his trademark mix of arrogance and apathy. This time, though, the mistake doesn't just cost mortal lives, it messes with the very fabric of fate. And it all starts with a woman named Arachne. Yes, that Arachne, the one whose name now clings to spiders and attic corners across the world. But once upon a myth, she wasn't eight-legged or skittering. She was a young mortal girl with a pair of skilled hands and the kind of confidence that ancient Greece didn't quite know what to do with. She lives in Lydia, a region known for its fine textiles, and she's famous for weaving. Not just average tapestries, but vibrant, impossibly detailed ones, threads that seem to shimmer with motion scenes that ripple like water. The people say she must have been taught by the gods. Surely no one mortal could possess such mastery. And Arachne, well, she doesn't take the compliment. She insists it's all her. No divine muse, no magical assistance. Her talent is earned, not bestowed. When the whispers turn into claims that Athena must have trained her, Arachne laughs. And then, she makes the worst mistake a mortal can make in mythology. She challenges a god to a contest. Specifically, she challenges Athena, the goddess of wisdom strategy, and unfortunately for Arachne, also the goddess of weaving. Now let's pause here. This is a great moment for Zeus to step in, to de-escalate, to say, hey, maybe mortals don't need to be smited every time they show some self-esteem. But as usual, Zeus does nothing. He lets it happen. Athena accepts the challenge. The two sit at their looms side by side. The air stills. Even the wind seems to hold its breath. For hours they work in silence, weaving visions into cloth. Athena weaves a grand, stately depiction of the gods in all their splendor. It's reverent, majestic, filled with scenes of mortals who defied the divine and paid dearly. Arachne, meanwhile, takes a risk. She weaves the gods at their worst, Zeus in particular. Scene after scene shows his many affairs, each more absurd than the last. Zeus turning into a swan to seduce Leda. A bull for Europa. A golden shower, yes, that one, for Danae. Her tapestry is flawless, technically perfect, artistically stunning, and brutally honest. Athena sees it and loses it, not because Arachne's work is inferior. On the contrary, it's better. It surpasses even the goddess's own. But the content, the gall. A mortal depicting the gods' shameful escapades with such boldness. Unacceptable. Athena tears the tapestry to shreds, and then, in a rage that seems fueled not just by insult, but by truth, she strikes Arachne. Humiliated, devastated, Arachne flees. Depending on the version, she either tries to hang herself or is about to when Athena saves her by transforming her into a spider, condemned to weave forever. And here again we see Zeus's favorite leadership style, ghosting. The god whose name features in most of Arachne's damning tapestry, the one whose behavior she exposed, doesn't appear. Doesn't defend her, doesn't apologize, doesn't even blink. Zeus just lets the story slide neatly into history as another cautionary tale: don't embarrass the divine, especially not with facts. Historians still argue whether the myth of Arachne is a feminist parable, a political satire, or simply a tale warning against hubris. But one thing is clear: Zeus's silence is deafening. His absence is as loud as thunder, and it teaches mortals a chilling lesson: truth is dangerous. Not because it's wrong, but because it's inconvenient. A quirky detail. Some later Roman versions of the myth soften the ending, suggesting Athena eventually regrets her rage. That maybe she gives spiders their silk as a tribute to Arachne's skill. But in Greek tradition, that mercy is rarely extended. The punishment remains weave in silence forever. Modern comparison. Imagine an investigative journalist uncovers scandal after scandal, and instead of accountability, they're fired, blacklisted, and turned into a meme for eternity. The person at the center of it all, silent, powerful, untouchable. Zeus's role in this myth is like that of an empire's shadow, omnipresent yet unaccountable. He creates the conditions for arrogance, then punishes anyone who dares hold up a mirror. Worse, Arachne's punishment isn't even because she lied. It's because she told the truth too well. That's a dangerous message. It says talent is less important than obedience. that excellence must be paired with deference or else, and it warps the idea of divine justice into something darker, something performative. Because if Zeus wanted to lead with wisdom, this would have been the moment. He could have acknowledged Arachne's art, admitted the flaws she captured, apologized even. But no. Pride wins. Power evades accountability. Again, even Athena, for all her intellect, becomes an agent of wrath when her ego is bruised. But Zeus, he doesn't even descend to defend himself. Maybe because he doesn't need to. Because the system, the mythos, is already built to protect him. To punish the critic, not the offense. The real tragedy isn't just Arachne's transformation. It's the world that demanded it. The world that looked at her defiance and thought, that's not brave. That's dangerous. And when spiders began spinning webs in corners, ancient Greeks didn't see art or rebellion. They saw a warning, weaving silent and endless like a girl who knew too much and paid the price. At this point in Zeus's long list of bad decisions, one might expect him to finally show growth. Some self-reflection, perhaps. A godly moment of, hey, maybe I am the problem. But no, instead, he doubles down on what might be his most far-reaching failure micromanaging fate, while pretending to let it flow freely. And that disaster is best illustrated by the legend of Olympus, a story where every bad decision feels almost handcrafted by divine interference. You've heard the basics: a prophecy, a murder, a riddle, and a guy who ends up marrying his mother. But behind that myth tangled in the roots is Zeus's favorite contradiction. I'm in control, but don't blame me. Let's unravel it. The city of Thebes is thriving under King Laius and Queen Jocasta. But like all good Greek tragedies, things go downhill fast. An oracle delivers a terrifying prophecy. If Laius fathers a child, that child will kill him and marry his wife. Now, a reasonable response might be, don't have kids. Or at least, don't have unprotected royal knights after such news. But Laius, as impulsive as any character in this drama, ignores the warning. Jocasta gives birth to a baby boy. Panicking, they do what most mortals do. When faced with divine danger, they try to cheat fate. They pierce the baby's ankles and order a servant to leave him on a mountain to die. Quick, quirky detail. Oedipus literally means swollen foot, named for the injury inflicted on him as an infant. Imagine if everyone just called you bruised toe for life. Anyway, fate, always the patient hunter, sidesteps their plan. The servant takes pity on the baby and instead gives him to a shepherd, who in turn delivers him to the childless King Polybus and Queen Merope of Corinth. They raise him as their own. Now, Zeus isn't actively featured in this myth, but his fingerprints are all over it. Why? Because he's the god who's supposed to govern fate, justice, and cosmic balance. And yet here, fate is a rigged machine rolling toward disaster like a boulder on a greased hill. Oedipus grows up unaware of his origins. One day, a drunk at a feast mutters that he's adopted. Oedipus, shaken, goes to the oracle at Delphi to ask the truth. And the oracle cryptically, and oh so helpfully, tells him, you will kill your father and marry your mother. No names, no details, just vague doom. Oedipus does what any terrified young man might. He runs away from Corinth, desperate to avoid harming the people he thinks are his parents. And on the road, he gets into a fight, a deadly one, with a chariot-bound stranger at a crossroads. Yes, he kills the man, not knowing it's Laius, his real father. Zeus could have intervened here, could have given a dream a warning, a lightning bolt to nudge the course, but he lets it play out. Oedipus arrives in Thebes, solves the Sphinx's riddle, remember that one, what walks on 4 legs in the morning, etc., and is crowned king. The reward, Jocasta's hand in marriage. His mother, yes, and they live for a while in blissful ignorance, until a plague strikes Thebes, because the gods aren't done twisting the knife. A prophet is summoned. One with the sort of dramatic flair you'd expect at an ancient TED Talk. And he drops the truth like a thunderclap. Oedipus is the killer of Laius, and the husband of his own mother. Cue Jocasta's horrified suicide. Cue Oedipus clawing his own eyes out. Cue his exile blind and broken. So where's Zeus in all this? Still holding court on Olympus, watching the disaster unfold like it's a particularly juicy soap opera. He doesn't warn Laius, doesn't clarify the oracle's riddle, doesn't stop Oedipus on the road or whisper the truth in his ear. He lets it happen. Historians still argue whether the myth of Oedipus is about fate's inevitability or the dangers of human pride. Some even say it's a parable for the impossibility of escaping your past, of how trying to dodge destiny only accelerates its arrival. But regardless of interpretation, Zeus remains suspiciously hands-off in a scenario where his guidance could have saved multiple lives and a whole city from ruin. Modern equivalent. It's like your GPS knows there's a sinkhole ahead but says, in 500 feet, turn left with a little smirk. It's easy to forget that in ancient Greek belief, fate wasn't just abstract, it was something managed, curated even by the gods. And Zeus, as the chief deity, was supposed to balance that fate with mercy and wisdom. Instead, he lets it play out with cold detachment. Oedipus becomes a symbol not of evil, but of tragic innocence. A man who tries to do the right thing at every turn and still loses everything because the deck was stacked from the start. There's a deeper cruelty in that. Zeus's refusal to intervene isn't neutrality, it's permission. And it raises the uncomfortable idea that maybe the gods didn't just allow suffering, they needed it. For their own stories, their own sense of purpose. Because what's a king of gods without the drama of mortals? Zeus seems to rule not by wisdom, but by spectacle. Oedipus's pain, that's part of the show. The people of Thebes' collateral damage in a divine experiment. And the lesson, that no matter how pure your intentions, the divine plan or its negligence will always trump your choices. The final image of this myth isn't a bolt of lightning or a roaring storm. It's a man blind and limping led by his daughter through a landscape that once adored him. A man whose only crime was trying to avoid his destiny. And behind it all, the king of Olympus sits still, silent, watching. There's something poetically ironic about how Zeus, the ruler of all gods, the wielder of thunder, the king of cosmic order, is ultimately undone not by an army, a rival, or even an angry titan, but by his own desperate need for control. That control, exercised clumsily and selfishly over centuries of myths, finds its fullest expression in the story of Prometheus and Pandora. If Oedipus showed us how Zeus weaponized fate through neglect, then Prometheus and Pandora reveal how he tightens his grip on humanity, not to protect them, but to punish them for potential. It starts innocently enough if you consider cosmic betrayal and divine paranoia innocent. Prometheus, a titan and cousin of Zeus, sees the mortal world struggling, shivering, afraid, powerless. He decides to give them a gift, not riches, not immortality, but fire. Literal fire, of course, but also metaphorical fire technology knowledge, the ability to shape their environment instead of being ruled by it. This is an unpardonable offense in Zeus's book. Not because fire is dangerous, but because it makes humans less dependent on the gods. And if there's one thing Zeus can't tolerate, it's independence. He views mortal growth as a threat, not a triumph. Prometheus steals fire from Olympus. Some say he lights a fennel stalk with a spark from the sun and gives it to humanity. Zeus, unsurprisingly, doesn't see this as a noble act. He sees it as rebellion. The punishment is legendary. Prometheus is chained to a rock, and every day an eagle comes to feast on his liver. Every night it regenerates, only for the agony to begin again. Eternal torment for the crime of helping humans evolve. Let that sink in. The king of gods, rather than sharing power or guiding wisely, reacts with sadism. Fire wasn't a weapon, it was a tool. A chance for humanity to become self-sufficient. But to Zeus, autonomy equals disobedience. And if this were the end of the story, it would already be grim. But of course, Zeus can't resist adding a final twist. He decides that punishing Prometheus isn't enough. The mortals who benefited must suffer too. And so Pandora is crafted. Crafted, not born from the finest materials. Sculpted by Hephaestus, given charm by Aphrodite, curiosity by Hermes, and of course a deadly gift from Zeus himself. That gift, a jar, often misremembered as a box, but originally a large storage jar. Inside all the evils of the world. Sickness, pain, war, deceit, suffering, and hope. Zeus gives Pandora to Epimetheus, Prometheus's dimmer brother. Despite warnings, Epimetheus accepts her. Pandora opens the jar. Evils spill out, staining the world forever. Only hope remains trapped inside. Historians still argue whether that final detail, hope sealed away, is a sign of mercy or a cruel joke. Is hope meant to sustain humanity, or torment them further, delaying their suffering with false comfort. Either way, Zeus's plan succeeds. Humans get their fire and all the curses that come with it. It's a move worthy of a tech billionaire in a sci-fi dystopia. You want power, fine. But here's the bill. Enjoy your anxiety, famine, and war. A quirky detail. Pandora's name literally means all gifted. She's the original double-edged sword, beauty and destruction in one. Ancient Greeks didn't just fear her, they blamed her. She became the ultimate scapegoat for why life hurts. But we know the truth. Zeus set it up. This wasn't an accident. He could have accepted Prometheus's gift as a step toward mortal maturity, could have guided them, mentored them, built a legacy as a wise leader. Instead, he played a long petty game of I told you so, all to maintain control. And yet, even in this mess, humanity persists. They keep the fire. They build cities, tell stories, invent philosophy, medicine, art. And maybe that's what frustrates Zeus most. That even in suffering, they grow, they learn, they hope. Modern comparison. It's like someone giving you access to the internet and then blaming you for every trollfishing scam and bad late-night purchase that follows. Sure, fire brought pain, but it also brought warmth, light, and the first roasted marshmallow. The gift was dangerous, yes, but essential. And Zeus, he becomes the symbol of the old guard. The paranoid ruler who punishes instead of teaching, who hoards wisdom like a dragon with treasure. And by the time his myths start fading from worship into metaphor, the world has already outgrown him. Even in his final mythic acts, Zeus is never the hero. He's the system, the storm behind the curtain, and the mortals. They're just trying to survive it. Which brings us quietly to the end. And now, with the thunder finally faded and the gods tucked away behind their clouds, the world grows still. You can almost hear the hush of ancient leaves drifting across the stones of forgotten temples. Marble once gilded in glory, now dusted in moss. The echoes of myth carried softly on the wind, like lullabies sung in a language long lost. Zeus, for all his might, sits quiet in memory. No lightning now, no booming commands or divine ultimatums. Just a shadow stretched thin across time. A reminder maybe of what power can do when it fears too much and listens too little. The mortals he once ruled, those trembling specks in the vast play of Olympus, went on to write their own epics, to light real fires, to shape real futures. They carved paths through centuries, not with thunderbolts, but with stories, with questions, with hope. And perhaps that's the most enduring rebellion of all, that even after gods fell silent, we still look to the stars, not in fear, but in curiosity. Tonight, as you lie back and breathe a little deeper, imagine the sky above you, not as a battleground of divine whims, but as an endless, gentle canvas. No storms, no judgments, just quiet constellations, winking their old secrets to the world below. The same world that once feared Zeus's wrath now dreams under peaceful stars. The same humanity that cowered beneath Olympus now tucks into bed, lets the weight of myth fall like a blanket, and drifts towards sleep. So rest easy, traveller. Let the echoes fade, the riddles soften. You've walked through temples and labyrinths, dodged curses and whispered prophecies, and you've made it to the other side, wiser perhaps, or just a little more curious. And if a spider spins a silent web near your window tonight, or thunder rumbles far away in the hills, don't worry. It's just the stories settling in for sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.